Okay guys, so today is probably the most important video I'm ever going to make because it describes how to use a study skill which is absolutely essential to long-term learning of information. And you've got a lot of information to learn this year. This is how to make flashcards. So the first thing to realise is you shouldn't be making a flashcard or a set of flashcards until you're confident about the topic. If you try and make the flashcards before you're confident, what you're going to be doing is writing on those flashcards all of your little misconceptions and all of the errors that you have. So when you then memorise those flashcards, you're going to be just reinforcing your misconceptions. And that's going to be very hard to then unpick later on. So certainly you shouldn't be making flashcards until after you've done the lesson on a topic. And really you should be having a review of your work afterwards as well. So how do you make a set of flashcards? Well, once you think you're confident with the topic, you should grab the syllabus. Now I've just picked a bit near the start of the syllabus and just have a little read through to make sure you're confident about what the important information is, because you don't want to be missing any of that out. So I've just picked one bullet point here. So atomic structure in terms of protons, neutrons and electrons with atomic number, mass number and charges. Okay, so that's the important information. Let's make a flashcard on that. So first of all, what I'm going to show you is a few examples of what not to do. So here's one example of what not to do. I've put electron, let's do a flashcard on electrons, and I turn it over and I've basically just copied a huge paragraph out of the book, a big chunk. Electrons are point-light objects that were first discovered in 1847 by J.J. Thomson, have a charge of -1 and a negligible mass. The problem with this is I've not extracted the important key information. There's too much information on this flashcard, it's too unwieldy. I've included things that aren't really supposed to be on flashcards. So let me just go through this flashcard and actually highlight what the important stuff here is. So electrons have a charge of -1, well that's important, and electrons have a negligible mass. So what I should have been doing when I made the flashcard is extracting all of this information that I've just circled and only including that on the flashcard. The more concise your flashcards can be, not only does all the evidence show that that helps with longer term learning, but it'll also just mean you find it easier to remember in the first place, because you haven't got all this extra guff here obscuring the important stuff. So this is an example of a bad flashcard. I've not extracted the key information. That is a very essential thing. Let's have another look at a different example. So again, I'm trying to do electrons and I've put charge equals 1 minus. Now this is better than the previous example because I haven't got any extra kind of nonsense information, but there's not much information on this flashcard. Certainly if this was an incredibly important point which you've kept on finding difficult to remember or you realised it was really essential, sure, just have this one fact on a flashcard then. But remembering a charge as 1 minus isn't particularly difficult. And so what I would have done is included just a little bit more information on our one flashcard. It is a little bit like the little bear's porridge in Goldilocks. You don't want too little, you certainly don't want too much. We need to be getting it just right. So here's an example of something I would consider a good flashcard. So we have the structure of an atom. We turn it over and you can see I've got a little bit more information there, and what that's going to do, it's going to help me make links in my brain when I remember this between these pieces of information. So if I memorise this flashcard now, whenever I think electrons, there's going to be a pathway in my mind to, oh, they've got a charge of 1 minus, oh, they've got a negligible mass. So now whenever anybody says, what has a negligible mass, I can think, oh, electrons, oh, and they've got a charge of 1 minus. It's going to link together better. You'll also notice I've just laid the flashcard out a little bit nicer to make it a bit more visual. Including diagrams and pictures is an incredibly useful trick on flashcards that will really help you remember. Now, for the structure of an atom, there's a really obvious diagram to draw. Sometimes there won't be an obvious diagram to draw, and definitely feel free to come up with your own example of a picture or something that'll help you remember it. Even if it doesn't really make sense to anyone but you, that doesn't really matter. As long as it helps with your memory, that's the important thing. And one more little fact about the presentation of your flashcards. Certainly you want to lay them out in a way that's going to be easy for you to read and easy for you to remember. But what I certainly wouldn't be doing is spending half an hour with different coloured pens and gel pens and highlighters and all of this rubbish. That is going to be counterproductive, as it will be an inefficient use of your time. So we want them to be memorable, but we don't want to be spending 20 minutes making one flashcard in fancy 3D pens or anything like that. Okay, so let's have a look at just one more example of a bad flashcard. So I've now made one on the periodic table, just a few facts about that, and you can see what I've done here. So straight away you can see, bosh, what's going on there? That's way too much information. Now, unlike my previous flashcard, let me just show you this again, where I hadn't picked out the useful information, I would say here, all of this information is useful. Everything on there is something we really do need to have on a flashcard somewhere. But this is definitely too much information for one flashcard. You could maybe split this over 2 or maybe even 3 different flashcards. So don't be trying to put down 30, 40 facts on one flashcard. A limit of 6 or 8 is certainly the top amount of facts you want on a single flashcard. So what maybe could this flashcard have looked like? So here's the periodic table. I've got either a title, sometimes having a question on one side is quite good. So for example, for my structure of an atom, I could have had instead, what is the charge and mass of the particles in an atom? And then we have the charge and mass on the back. So that's not a bad idea. So periodic table, and you can see again, I've tried to draw a little diagram, well, kind of a diagram, to help me picture it, to help me remember it. I do have, if you go in the study skills section of the VLE, a little file about drawing diagrams and pictures and also word mnemonics. So definitely do read that if you haven't already. And you can see I've just got a bit more of a manageable amount of information on my flashcard there. So that's flashcards, incredibly important. You will struggle to succeed in chemistry no matter how smart you are if you don't utilise flashcards. They are absolutely essential. So thank you very much guys, have a nice day, and I'll catch you in a bit.